Përshëndetje shikues të nderuar. Unë jam Krishni Gashti dhe ju po ndiqni emisionin Drejtesia në Kosovë. Sonte do diskutojmë për gjendjen e burgjeve të Kosovës. Përfshirë këtu ekzistimin e personave të paprekshëm në burgjet e Kosovës, lirimet e pabaza me kusht, si dhe mbajtjen e armëve dhe telefonave nga të burgosurit në burgjet e Kosovës. Për të diskutuar këtë çështje, ne kemi intervistuar shefin e komponentës së ULEX-it për Shërbimin Korrektues, Stephan. Ta ndjekim intervistën me të.
Zoti Johnson, a mund të më na tregu prej nga vini dhe çfarë eksperiencë të punës keni pas në vendin prej nga vini ju?
Yeah, I'm from the United Kingdom. My background is I worked for many years for the English and Wales Prison Service. I carried out several roles within the English Prison Service. I was a senior officer. Mostly my area involved prison security. And since then, I've worked internationally now. I'm in my 12th year internationally on various prison reform projects. I was here initially in 2001 for 3 years with the United Nations. And then I spent 4 years in Africa working on prison reform projects. And then I returned to Kosovo in 2008 and currently chief of the ULEX Correctional Unit.
Në 2001 keni qenë si pjesë, keni punu në burgjet atëherë?
Yes, in 2001 I joined UNMIK. I worked for UNMIK at Dubrava Prison. I also worked at Prizren. I was a director at Prizren Detention Centre for 1 year, and then for a short period at the Libyan Female and Juvenile Facility as the director.
Cili është dallimi prej asaj koha me tash?
I've noticed many differences. Obviously, the main difference since my first time in Kosovo is the fact that now international administration of the prisons has stopped. ULEX, we play a role in monitoring and supporting our colleagues, but the main difference from my UNMIK days is that we were in charge of the prisons within Kosovo. Now it's nice to come back after a 4-year break within Kosovo and discover that many of the Kosovo Correctional Service staff I worked with had become managers and basically responsible for the running of the Kosovo Correctional Service.
Po, a ka ndru burgjet diçka prej asaj koha? A ka ndru në cilësi, kualitet? A janë më të mira burgjet atëherë apo tash?
I think in a lot of cases, yes. I think certainly, immediately we have to stop and recognise that the Kosovo Correctional Service is a fledgling, a young institution, like many institutions here in Kosovo. We're in our 12th year, the Kosovo Correctional Service. And so, of course, many challenges and there's still a lot of work ahead. But, sometimes I read and I observe negative comments and allegations of corruption and security incidents in prisons. But sometimes we need to sort of sit back and realise where they've come from in such a short time. Conditions within Kosovo Correctional Service facilities for prisoners, I believe, are more than acceptable, better than the regional average. I read various monitoring reports from prisons within the region, and okay, currently within Kosovo, there are areas that can be improved, but the KCS and the Ministry of Justice are looking at that. Currently now there's ongoing refurbishment projects in areas where the accommodation levels are not as high as they should be. But in reality, overall, the conditions and the activities for prisoners has improved greatly.
Po thoni që burgjet tona janë më të mira se në vendet e regionit, po prej asaj që kem pa na në burgjet tona ka një mungesë theksuar të sigurisë, ka shumë telefona, futet shumë drogë, madje futet edhe armë.
Okay, there's no doubting the fact that there are challenges with regards to security. with regards to contraband entering prisons in Kosovo. Nobody can hide this fact, it's widely reported, and yes, it's true. But there have been a lot of concerted efforts by the Correctional Service with ULEX support to try and stop the contraband entering the prison. I mean, just in a snapshot, the fact that there's widely more reported incidents of contraband fines now than there was 2 or 3 years ago, that could be down to the fact that the staff have actually improved in detecting contraband. So, I mean, it could have been the same amount of contraband entering prisons 3 years ago, but they weren't being discovered. So at least the staff now are actively trying to discover contraband and trying to prevent or reduce contraband coming into prison. However, I accept the fact that to be really successful in this, you need to find how and why such things as phones, and very worrying, the recent incident with a firearm, how these are entered in prison. It's very, very concerning.
Pjesa më e madhe e njerëzve thonë që vetë stafi I fut të gjana mbrana në burgje. Vetë oficerët korrektues merren me kontrabandën e armëve, alkoolit, drogës e tjera, telefonave.
We heard the same allegations, and in all honesty, I believe yes, there are certain staff who are involved in illegal activity and corruption, no doubt about it. But it must be stated that they're in the minority. We've got a lot of experience here. I interact greatly with a lot of the Kosovo Correctional Service staff, and a lot of them are professional. A lot of them want to do their job and want to do it to the highest standards. But there are definitely some staff who are involved in corrupt activities.
Ka pas hetime edhe prej ULEX-it edhe prej Policisë të Kosovës edhe nuk kanë mujt, madje ka pas edhe bastisje gjana edhe nuk kanë mujt me gjetë kush po I shtin telefonat në burgje.
Well, I'm not aware of to what extent any investigations have been undertaken by ULEX. From my point of view, we've certainly supported the Kosovo Correctional Service internally to try to identify avenues of contraband entering the prison. It's a difficult area to really address, no more so than the fact that it's very difficult in Kosovo, and the Correctional Service is no different than other institutions. There's no avenue for what we call whistleblowers. It's very difficult for a staff member to come out and provide evidence against any other staff member. You know, let's be honest, staff, they're already in a very difficult profession. Being a correctional officer is a very difficult profession, and you add that we know in Kosovo, to add to the normal hard job, they might face intimidation, they might face threats. So it is a challenge to get credible evidence in order to challenge the individuals bringing contraband into prisons.
Po pse është ju po thoni që ka shumë staf të mirë në Shërbimit Korrektues, pse ata nuk po dëshmojnë pra për kolegët e tyre që po kryjnë kontrabandë mbrana burgje?
Again, I'm not certain, but it could be through either threats or intimidation. A lot of staff are scared, you know. There's a lot of, you need to accept as well that there's a lot of what I would call influential prisoners inside some of the correctional facilities here in Kosovo. And there's no doubt about it, in my mind, they exert a certain amount of pressure on correctional service staff.
Kush janë këta të burgosur me ndikim që I bajnë stafit presion? A kanë emra?
Well, I'm not in the business of naming names or naming individuals, because a lot of my thoughts are based on, for example, media reports that come from you guys. But let me try and explain it how I see it here in Kosovo. There are no doubt a certain group of prisoners that try to exert their authority, whether it be through their connections, whether it be through their wealth. But let's put us for a minute in the position that the Kosovo Correctional Service in. They have prisoners in their care who were investigated by the international community, whether it be UNMIK or currently ULEX police investigators. Why was it these individuals couldn't be investigated by the KP? They were prosecuted by international prosecutors. Okay. They were adjudicated on by international judges. So why couldn't local prosecutors prosecute them, and why couldn't they be adjudicated by Kosovo judges? So then they're eventually sent to Dubrava prison or elsewhere, and then the Kosovo Correctional Service are expected to manage these people. The other elements of the judiciary and institutions couldn't deal with certain offenders, and yet once they're convicted, they're sent to Dubrava prison, and the Kosovo Correctional Service are, with their limited experience, are expected then to manage these people 24 hours a day, and often for a large number of years. It's difficult. It's a really difficult environment for them to operate in, and it will take them a number of years to get systems in place to improve internal procedures, to improve security systems, to be able to address these challenges which are occurring now.
Ju po folni për frikën, po folni për njerëz që janë gjykuar për EU-leksit. Këta njerëz na i dim, janë njerëz të politikës edhe njerëz të krimit të organizuar. Pse duhet gardiani me pas frikë për tyre?
Because of maybe their previous status within Kosovo. It could be because of their wealth.
Çfarë statusi kanë pas ata në Kosovë?
Without going into individual cases, we're talking in general of a core prisoners. It could be their previous affiliation during the war or the conflict. It could be that they come from a background of wealth. You know, there's a number of different issues that could affect the situation within the Dubrava prison. My argument is that you ask, why can't the guards deal with these people? I ask, why couldn't the local judiciary deal with them, and why couldn't the local police deal with them? It's difficult. So if other elements of the judiciary in Kosovo couldn't investigate, prosecute and adjudicate on certain prisoners within Dubrava, then consideration must be afforded to the correctional service, who then have to deal with these difficult people on a daily basis.
Çdo ditë ministri i Drejtësisë në Kosovë del dhe thotë që janë të gatshëm me luftu krimin e organizuar. Përfshirë këta njerëz që janë marrë në burgje.
Yes, and he's taken steps to do that. Just in the last 12 months, he has formed within the Ministry of Justice an internal inspectorate to oversee and to investigate areas of the correctional system. But again, this is a new initiative, and I'm happy to say that we in ULEX and some of the staff within my unit are supporting the internal inspectorate. It can be compared, if you like, with PIC, but on a lot smaller scale and with a lot less resources. But again, it will take time. Now they're currently investigating and auditing areas within the prison system, but they also need to gain experience. They also need to gain investigative skills, and hopefully in the future they will be able to then investigate some of these more challenging areas of corruption within the correctional service.
Ky shërbim është kriju, po ashtu ka pas hetime prej policisë dhe prej EU-leksit. Mirë po kohëve të fundit, ministri Kuqi ka kërku prej AKI-s që të bëjë verifikimin e të kaluarës së gardianëve të cilët punojnë, për shkak se ka konsideruar që këto hetime nuk kanë nxjerrë asgjë pa. A jeni ju ndjeni që ka kërku prej AKI-s ministri hetime?
No, I'm not aware of the details of any investigation that's being carried out, whether it be by police or even ULEX police. I work solely in support of the Kosovo Correctional Service and their staff.
Po, a jeni ndjeni që AKI-ja ka filluar me verifiku gardianët që punojnë në Shërbimin Korrektues?
No, I'm not aware that the intelligence agency is investigating anybody.
Disa prej udhëheqësve të ndërrimeve madje kanë ndru pozitat për shkak të këtyre vlerësimeve të AKI-s.
I am aware that some staff within the Dubrava prison have been either rotated between positions, but that's, as far as I'm aware, that is the decision made between the director of Dubrava prison and the Director General. And they are internal moves designed to improve procedures within Dubrava prison. And it's normal, in my experience, that staff are rotated. But if those rotations have been made due to information received from any third party, including the intelligence service, then I'm not aware of that.
Ju nuk dini që AKI-ja ka marrë pyetje zyrtar Shërbimit Korrektues?
No, I'm not aware the intelligence agency questioned anybody within the correctional service of Kosovo.
Më intereson, a është normale që për shembull në shtetin prej nga vini ju, prej Anglisë, shërbimi inteligjent më u përfshi në verifikim të kaluarës pjesëtarëve që punojnë në shërbime korrektuese?
At home, anybody who joins the correctional service in any developed correctional service throughout Europe would have to have a background check by national authorities to make sure that they've got no previous criminal convictions, and to make sure that they've broken no laws, etc. And so I don't know to what extent that is being applied here in Kosovo. I don't know the involvement, as I've just said, about the intelligence service within the correctional service in Kosovo, but the fact that staff have background checks made on them is a normal procedure.
Kisha dashur të kthehemi tek ajo që quhet përgjegjësi morale e njerëzve të cilët kanë përgjegjësi në shërbimin korrektues. Në ndërvite në Kosovë, në burgjet tona ka ndodhur disa arratisje për burgjeve dhe disa tentim arratisje, edhe askush prej zyrtarëve të nalt burgjeve nuk ka dhënë përgjegjësi, nuk ka dhënë ndërheqje për këto arratisje. Çu e kish komentuar këto?
Again, escapes. I'm not aware of an escape that's happened. The last major escape I know, I think, was 2007. Since then, I know there's been some attempt escapes. There has been what we would call, in my country, some abscons, some people who have left the semi-open, low-security facility at Dubrava. And there's been some people that have failed to come back from home leaves. But it's normal. If you look at statistics across Europe, you know, prisoners are in the game of trying to escape. You've got people in custody that are there to protect society. And yes, it's very serious, and it could be potentially dangerous if people do escape, and every effort should be made to prevent or to reduce escapes. But you know, in the context of Kosovo, I really don't think it's while it's a problem, and while every effort should be made to reduce attempted escapes, it's always gonna happen. And in Kosovo, I don't believe it's any more serious than any other countries throughout the region.
Po është problem qofse askush nuk ka përgjegjësi për këto arratisje.
But I'm quite sure that the Kosovo Correctional Service and the Ministry of Justice do hold people accountable. I know from the escape, and I'm referring back to 2007, this is before ULEC's mandate started, I know people were held accountable internally for the escape, for the last major escape from Dubrava. I know some people may be still, although I don't know all the details, may still be in custody as a result of that escape.
Ata janë shkarku, po nuk kanë dhënë ndërheqje.
Okay, well, again, that's something that I'm not aware of. You know, you also got to stop here and take reflection of what our mandate is. We're here to support the Kosovo Correctional Service in a limited capacity. We've got no executive authority. We're under what we call our MMA, mentoring, monitoring and advisory. So a lot of these sort of assumptions, or a lot of these allegations that you have, maybe it's something you need to take up with the correctional service, because I haven't got access to a lot of this information myself.
Më intereson gjatë punës tuaj, a takoni me të burgosërit, a bisedoni me ta për problemet që I kanë ata?
I occasionally meet prisoners during my visits. I make regular visits with the Director General to correctional facilities throughout Kosovo. But more so my staff, we do have staff co-located at some of the prison facilities, and they on a daily basis come into contact with prisoners, and they talk to prisoners, they listen to prisoners, and if need be, they report back to the correctional service any concerns.
Pa ju kanë treguar ata që në burgjet e Kosovës ekzistojnë grupe të cilat I kontrollojnë të burgosërit, çka më bë, çush më bë, çfarë veprimesh më bë, grupet kriminalëve mbrana burgut.
No, not personally to me, but I wouldn't expect any difference. Every prisons all around the world have gang cultures. You know, prisons is one of the best places in the world to become a better criminal, because people who are convicted for the first time often learn through other criminals how to engage in criminal activity. So it's no surprise that things like this happen. You know, and this is why in the future, as we develop Kosovo correctional service further, you know, people should be averted away from custody where possible. The next steps is to start looking at alternatives. People need to be protected from custody where possible so that criminal gangs and affiliations don't develop in prisons. Also, you've got to understand it's very difficult for the correctional service at the moment because, as you say, 12 years old, the only prison that is suitable at the moment for adult sentenced males is Dubrava Prison. So Dubrava Prison has to deal with every category of offender, which adds to the challenges that we've already discussed today. If they have a problematic prisoner, what do they do with him? Normally, in most countries, they would be able to transfer that prisoner to another prison suitable for that offender. Kosovo hasn't had that. Now, later on this year, a new high security prison will be open in Kosovo. This is the trigger point. This is an opportunity for Dubrava to stabilise. Because for the first time in the short history of the Kosovo Correctional Service, they will be able to manage their population better. And so these areas of concerns that you've mentioned should be able to be challenged. And for the first time, prisoners can be segregated and placed in prisons that meet the needs of them individual prisoners. But to date, the Dubrava prisoner has had to deal with everything from woodcutters to war crimes to murderers. So it's a very difficult area.
A të thotë kjo që ndërtimi I burgut të ri ka mi zgjidhë gjitha problemet, edhe telefonat, edhe të burgosurit autoritativ të cilët as gardianës mujnë me I kontrollu?
I wouldn't say it will solve all the problems. There's not a prison system around the world that doesn't have similar problems, but it's an opportunity. It's a real opportunity. But there has to be political will and government support for the Kosovo Correctional Service to achieve this. Building prisons to be able to manage the various elements of the prison population is all well and good, but the prison then needs to be afforded suitable finances, be able to recruit and then train professional staff, and they should then also be afforded the proper security needs that a modern prison service would need. For instance, in the last several years, there has been improvements with regards to CCTV cameras around Dubrava prison. But, you know, technology moves on, and so government support to prison system needs to move on in comparison. And so the correctional service, as far as I am concerned, they are trying under difficult circumstances to improve security, but it also needs further support in order for them to advance further.
Kisha dashur me ditë nga ju, kemi dëgjuar që njëri prej favoreve që ju bëhet këtyre të burgosurve që edhe ju po I quheni autoritativ është dërgimi I tyre në spitalin e Burgut ose edhe në spitalin e Prishtinës. Çka mundi më na thonë për këtë rast?
Yes, like everybody else, I'm concerned about the the number of prisoners that use the hospital in Pristina. But again, this is a difficult one for the Kosovo Correctional Service to manage or challenge. Prisoners are only sent to outside hospital on recommendation from a suitably qualified doctor or a medical expert. Now, I've heard the rumours and the allegations, like anybody else, that certain prisoners misuse the fact that the use of outside hospital. But this is something that it's difficult for the correctional service to combat, because it would be a very brave director of a prison who decides to go against the recommendations of a doctor. Imagine if the director of the Brava prison refuses the request of a doctor to send a certain prisoner to hospital, and then something happens to that prisoner because he didn't receive medical treatment. They're in, again, a difficult situation. Now, I agree, it needs to be regulated, there needs to be challenged more, but it's about the angle of the challenges. You know, it's a difficult area, and people need to realise that it's a difficult area for the director of the Brava prison to face.
Qysh mundet drejtori I burgut të Bravës me rregullu këtë çështje, me stopu këtë çështje, me marrë doktor të ri apo me kërku hetime për këto raste? Thashë thonët kanë dalë që njerëz pacientë smut po dalin edhe po shkojnë në Prishtinë, në burgun në spitalin e Prishtinës.
Okay, I think an important step the government are making is currently in process, and that is the health services within Kosovo Correctional Service institutions will be handed from the Kosovo Correctional Service responsibility to the Ministry of Public Health. And so provisions of healthcare within prisons, and I would take it from that, the human resource element, the doctors, etc., will come under control of the Ministry of Health. And I see this as a positive step on behalf of the government and the Ministry of Justice to try and deal with this type of issue. So hopefully now the medical services within the prisons will be able to get specialist referrals, specialist doctors to be able to recommend that a prisoner could be, for instance, cared for within the prison hospital. So I believe that they are making positive steps to try and deal with this issue. But it is a difficult area. Also, I know that the Correctional Service and the Ministry of Justice are planning to build a secure facility within the grounds of Pristina University Hospital. And so it would make it less attractive for prisoners to want to spend time within the prison grounds, because they wouldn't be on a public ward. They would be in a side ward that's purposely modified to house prisoners. And so they are trying to address this negative issue.
Është poashtu sfidë tjetër që na përmendet burgoset, është edhe fakti I lirimeve gjatë vikendeve, fitimi I vikendit për një të burgosur. Edhe aty thuhet se ka keq përdorime.
Any systems within a prison are open to abuse, and these are the more favourable ones. You've talked about conditional release. You're now talking about home leaves from prison. Yes, I've got no doubt that there's been abuses within that area in the past. I mean, this is one of the areas that the Minister of Justice and the Director General had concerns about back in 2012. There was allegations that there was abuse in this area, so they took the necessary steps. They removed the management team at the Brava. They replaced them with an interim management team. The brief of that interim management team was to ensure that procedures followed law, and that practices with regards to home leave and conditional release met fully procedures as written under law. And I know there was vast improvements in that area. So yes, I mean, what you're saying has occurred in the past, but the Correctional Service and the Ministry have took steps. And now a new director's been appointed recently, and he needs to be given the support and the time to hopefully reduce and eradicate any forms of misuse of the home leave system.
Po qysh mu nalto kur kërkush ende nuk ka shku në burg për keq përdorimet për cilat ju drejtar të folët?
The fact that nobody's been arrested, if that's correct, I can't comment. Maybe there was no evidence to lead to a criminal conviction. But I mean, due to the fact that people were replaced, high-ranking people were replaced, people were held to account internally, suggest that there have been internal measures within the Kosovo Correctional Service and the Ministry of Justice. They've took steps internally. Whether there was any additional evidence that could have led to a criminal investigation, I'm not aware of. But I'm just confident and happy that steps have been taken internally.
Për këtë çështje ne kontaktuam me ish drejtorin e burgut të Dubravës, Hakim Maxharaj.
Zotri Maxharaj, keni qenë drejtori i burgut Dubravës. A mundi më na tregu gjatë kohës kur ju keni menaxhuar me këtë burg, a ka pas lirime gjatë vikendit në mënyrë të parregullt?
Gjatë periudhës 4 vjeçare, 3 muaj sa kam qenë drejtori i përgjithshëm i qendrës korrektuese në Dubravë, të gjitha lirimet vikendit janë dhënë konform ligjit mbi ekzekutimin e sanksioneve penale, më saktësisht nenit 95 dhe nenit 96. Do të thotë neni 95 parashet lirime të rregullta, vikende të rregullta në shtëpi, me përmbushjen e kritereve, dhe neni 96 lirimet e jashtëzakonshme. Po gjithnjë, në rastin e këtyre lirimeve janë disa procedura që të ligjshme që ne i kemi zbatuar. Spori pa ceku se për çdo të burgosur që bën kërkesën nëpërmes punëtorit social ti që përcjell punën e tij, i drejtohet panelit për intervistim, për vlerësim. Në atë panel marrin pjesë të gjithë komponentët zyrtar që përcjellin punën, sjelljen dhe çdo gjë rreth atij të burgosurit, si në aspektin juridik, ashtu në aspektin social, edhe dalin me rekomandim para drejtorit për dhënjet të vikendit. Këto raste gjithherë janë zbatuar, gjithherë është mbajtur ai panel, edhe kanë dalë me rekomandime para meje për gjatë asaj periudhe, dhe unë kam shfrytzuar ato kompetenca ligjore dhe mundësi ligjore dhe kompetencat mia, edhe i kemi liruar të burgosurit.
Zoti Maxharaj, ju jeni largu prej detyrës para disa muajsh, edhe njëra prej arsyeve pse është thënë se ju jeni largu kanë qenë edhe lirimet gjatë vikendit. A mundi më shpjegoj pak, a është kjo arsye?
2 arsye janë që mu më shkruan në mendim. Një është sipas drejtorit përgjithshëm të ish drejtorit, se tash edhe ai ka dhënë dorëheqje, ne shkruan për moskthimin e burgosurit Bojar Basha nga vikendi, se ti ka taku ligjshmërisht në bazë të nenit 96, edhe mos efikasitet në punë.
A është arsye që ju jeni largu prej pozitës për shkak të lirimeve gjatë vikendit?
Ashtu shkruan edhe potencon pikërisht mos kthimin e Bojar Bashës, mirë po për këtë rast dhe për rastet e tjera ka bën hetime detale hetuesia regjionale e PES, dhe çdo rast për rast ka hetu, edhe ka ardhur në përfundim që mu ka konfirmu para 3 javë që rasti yt dhe rastet e tjera rreth teje janë të mbyllura dhe nuk ka asnjë element për iniciim procedurës penale, që ka qenë kryesorja për mu. Zhgarkimet dhe emërimet ato.
E ku jeni tash me procedurat e emërimeve?
Unë e kam shfrytzuar ato rrugë e mia ligjore, se tjetër formës nuk kam pas, edhe nuk ka format ligjore për fitimin e të drejtave të mia. Edhe kam bën kontest administrativ në ish gjykatën supreme, tash vjen në gjykatën themelore, në restorin kompetent, edhe shqyrtohet rasti im.
Tash do më thonë keni ngrit padi?
Kom ngrit padi zyrtare në afat ligjor, edhe pres që gjyqësia të fjalën e vet.
Kisha dashur me kalu në një pjesë tjetër ku diskutojmë rreth kushteve në burgjet e Kosovës dhe atyre në burgjet e Bashkimit Evropian. Çfarë kushtesh kanë të burgosin në Kosovë krahasuar me ata në BE, vendet e BE-s?
Okay, there's no doubt that certain facilities for prisoners could be improved in Kosovo, but the foundations, as far as I'm concerned, the foundations are in place. Prisons throughout Europe, and certainly prisons who are accountable to international and European prison rules to create standards, they would offer rehabilitation projects, they would offer sporting facilities, health facilities, education, chances to obtain skills, vocational training, work programs within prisons. Now, there's nothing that I've just described to you that is not possible within the Kosovo Correctional Service. They have EU-funded workshops at Dubrava and Lipian prison. They have educational blocks, they have healthcare. They have opportunities, but the challenge remains at the moment is they're underutilised. So the foundation's in place, but now there needs to be a commitment to build on that foundation. It needs financial support so they become sustainable. I've got, my personal concerns are when I walk around Dubrava prison, fantastic workshops where prisoners can learn a trade, such as carpentry, electrics, etc. But sadly, the funding's not in place for them to become sustainable. And so, as far as I'm concerned, the workshops are underused. Now, this is mainly due to...
Po sa fonde nevojitën për me I bërë shfrytzuar ato pjesë, ato punëtori?
When you consider, for them to become self-sustainable, it would only need an initial funding. But the problem Kosovo has, if you compare it, say, with my country, it's the open competition. Now, the prisons have got, for instance, there's a fantastic metalwork shop down at the Dubrava prison that makes some quality products. But who are they going to sell them to? You know, ethically, in my country, prisons have a chance to manufacture goods that can be sold on the open market or through the tendering process to other firms. In Kosovo, it would be ethically wrong at this moment to start selling goods on the open market when unemployment within Kosovo is so high. And so prisons offer cheap labour, and so products could be made very cheaply within prisons, but then ethically should then they be sold on the open market throughout Kosovo, and see a lot of people who are struggling for work and struggling to make a living in Kosovo, they will be affected by this. There needs to be an avenue explored within Kosovo institutions and the government. Prisons maybe could be used to manufacture goods used in other government departments. For instance, in government buildings, doors, windows, etc. could be made in prison. So at the moment, that's not in place. But as I said, the foundations are there, and over time, I believe that there will be, with proper resources and proper direction, then there'll be better opportunities for offenders to be able to rehabilitate through attending not only education, but vocational training, learning trades, and this will also prepare them for integration back in the community.
Sipas asaj që po e thoni ju, për momentin ata nuk kanë edhe shumë mundësi mu rehabilitu.
Not to the standards that I would like to see. Yes, that's correct. You know, they do a tremendous job within Dubrava and also Lipian. Lipian's an excellent example of where...
Po ka dhe qendra tjera, është Prizreni, është Prishtina, është Smerkovnica, nuk janë veç këto dy.
Yeah, but they're pre-trial detention facilities. They were built as pre-trial detention facilities. And okay, let's concentrate on them just for a moment so I can get this point across. The pre-trial detention facilities in Kosovo, they are also working under challenging circumstances. The majority of them now are full. Because they're full, there's too many pre-trial detainees in Kosovo at the moment. So Dubrava now, as well as all the challenges we discussed earlier, Dubrava have now got almost 300 pre-trial detainees that shouldn't be in Dubrava, they should be in pre-trial detention facilities. Now, the pre-trial detention facilities are designed for prisoners to serve maximum 2-3 months while they wait to go to trial. Now, because of other challenges within the judicial process in Kosovo, the prisoners are being stuck in pre-trial detention facilities for too long. Because the courts have so many cases, because they can't process all the cases, then it has a knock-on effect to the correctional service in Kosovo, who then have to deal with the additional challenge of housing prisoners that should have had their day at court, that should have went to trial maybe 1 year ago. And so the pre-trial detention facilities were originally designed to make sure that prisoners only spent 2 or 3 months, and then they would, once if they were convicted at trial, they would go to a purpose-built facility such as Drejtesia. That's not happening. Now, again, the Ministry and the Correctional Service have taken steps. The government have committed and have started to build yet another prison in Gjatë region. It's to service the courts within Gjatë. But unlike the present and the outdated pre-trial facility in Gjatë, it will also offer purpose-built activities such as education, such as sports facilities and healthcare. And so they are forward-thinking. But again, I reiterate, 12 years this service has been in operation, but they are thinking and they've got a vision how to deal with these problems long-term.
Kisha dashur me ju pyet rreth shërbimit sprovues të Kosovës. Konkretisht kisha dashur me ju pyet nëse ju ka rënë në sy pse në Kosovë nuk ka shumë dënime me punë në dobi të përgjithshme.
Again, that's a concern of ours, alternatives to sentencing. We encourage the government to look for alternatives to sentencing. We've identified it as an area of concern. As such, in cooperation with the Kosovo Correctional Service and ourselves and the EU office, later on this year, an EPA-funded twinning project is going to start in Kosovo. The EU are investing up to 2 million in this project, and part of this project is to look at alternatives to sentencing, to have full and better cooperation and use of the probation service also in Kosovo. What you've asked is totally right. There's too many people being sent to prison that shouldn't be there. Now, it's essential that there's will to change this, that the courts need to be educated to stop sending everybody to prison. Not just once sentenced, but there's also, in my opinion, a lot of pre-trial detainees that could have alternatives to sitting in a cell for 12 months waiting for their court trial to begun. We all know of instances in Kosovo where people are on house arrest. So if certain people can go on house arrest, then it should be an option open to other pre-trial detainees. There should be elements for them to be able to report to police stations instead of going into custody. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not advocating this for all categories of offenders. There's certain offences that people commit that there's no alternative but imprisonment. But in Kosovo, sadly, there's a lot of offences that there could be an alternative to. And the main reason this needs to happen is imprisonment should be a last resort because of the cost elements to the public and to the government. It costs far too much money per person to send someone to prison per day than it would be to look at an alternative where they can contribute to society.
Pjesa e paraburgimeve veç është trajtuar në njërin prej emisioneve tona dhe kem konstatuar që në pjesën më të madhe Kosova është vendi me mas shumë të paraburgime në rajon. Çu e kishë komentuar ju këto?
Yes, I mean your pre-trial rates of detention here, there's 2/3 more in pre-trial than you have got sentenced currently in Kosovo. So and they're the numbers off my head, looking back at recent statistics. Now that is not the European norm. Normally, pre-trial detention should be a fast and efficient way to process a person who's committed the crime into custody, and so we start, once sentenced, can start receiving specialist rehabilitation programs to help them re-socialise back into the community. But at the moment, pre-trial detainees in Kosovo is becoming a concern. all the pre-trial detention facilities are full, as we've said, and so now Dubrava are dealing with pre-trial detainees. Now this is something that needs assistance from other judicial actors. The Correctional Service, I know, with our support, we've visited all the district courts in Kosovo. With the ex-president of the Assembly of ULEX judges with support, and we've tried to convince the various judicial actors to look at alternatives to pre-trial detention. And so the problem associated with the Kosovo Correctional Service is impacted on by other judicial institutions. The Correctional Service, it is a problem, and it's them that's got to deal with it. But in many ways, it's not, the problem isn't caused by them, it's caused by the process of trials, long duration in pre-trial detention. And so there needs to be an emphasis and support within the judiciary to curb this.
Folëm për dënimet alternative, kisha dashur me ditë për juve, çka po e pengon gjykatën në Kosovë me shqiptu dënime alternative? Për shembull, me shqiptu dikujt dënim me dalë me pastru rrugën për një ditë, e jo me dënu me një ditë burg.
Again, that's one that should really be asked by the judiciary. I think they need, and I think this assistance program that's coming out later this year is designed to try and work with the judiciary to try and give them an understanding that there are alternatives to imprisonment. I mean, I see so many times where people getting denied bail because, and the reason always seems to be might make flight. It means that they might. But sometimes these people, even if they were convicted, are looking at minor offences where maybe they would only spend 1 or 2 years in prison. So people, I sincerely believe that the judiciary need to be made aware of the possibilities for alternative sentencing. I believe the problem lies there and not within the correctional system. The correctional system merely inherits the problems associated with too many people being sent to prison.
Diskutuam për shumë gjëna, për shumë parregullsi, për shumë plane, po për mendimin tuaj, edhe sa vjet duhet që Shërbimi Korrektues i Kosovës, burgjet e Kosovës të rrinë standardet evropiane. Një burg i Kosovës të krahasohet me një burg për shembull në Angli, për i vendit nga vini ju.
Now that's a difficult one. I sincerely hope that the Kosovo Correctional Service continues to receive support in comparative with Kosovo police and the judiciary. They've got a long way to go, they've got many challenges. As I previously said, they've come a long way in 12 years. Till it gets to the standards of my country. Listen, the prison service in my country is 200-300 years old, right? They're currently suffering from overcrowding. There's a hell of a lot of security incidents, and there has been many high-profile escapes over the years. So you're never going to eradicate these types of incidents in any prison system. But I believe in the Kosovo correctional system. I know they've got challenges. I know they've got an element of staff that can be considered possibly corrupt, but they have many professional staff who care about the system. They want to move the system forward, and with international support and monitoring, I'm confident that in the next up to 10 years, then they could move forward and compete with any correctional service within the EU. You know, the vision's there, the thinking, the mentality is there. They need to eradicate certain negative elements of the correctional service, but that's not advocated currently by this current Minister of Justice or by the current Director General. They admit to the challenges and to the areas of negative activity, and they're committed. If that commitment continues and there's a government will to invest in prisons in Kosovo, because any government, a functioning sustainable correctional system can only be achieved with government support. There needs to be a political will to develop a system that meets and continues to subscribe to European standards. And I'm confident that they're going in the right direction.
Shikues të nderuar, ne kaq kishim për sonte. Ju mund të na gjeni në drejtësia në Kosovë.com dhe të gjithë ata që dëshirojnë ta luftojnë korrupsionin mund të na shkruajnë në kallzo.com. Unë tani po ju lë me rubrikën Policia dhe nga unë Krishtin Gashi. Deri të dielën e ardhshme, mos e shkelni ligjin.
Gjërimet në vazhdim janë bërë në bashkëpunim me zyrtarët e policisë së Kosovës. Personat e paraqitur në këtë pamje janë plotësisht të pafajshëm, përderisa të dëshmohet e kundërta me vendim të plotfuqishëm të organeve të drejtësisë.
Jemi rrugën e spitalit, lidhur me një rast kanosje që i ka ndodhur. Kemi morë informat për një ankusi, që një person e ka kanos me armë viktimen. Jem më shku me këshyr që ka më pyetja lidhur me armën që u prezentu. Pra, kem arrit që edhe dyshimtin e kemi veti, së bashku me të jem drejtim shtëpis. Lokacionit sa ku ka ndodhur, lidhur me armën që u prezentu ma herët kanosin. Pra këtu jemi lokacionin ku u do karma, që ka kanos personin me armë. Tash ke marrë që ta morrim armën. Më thonë veç 10 veni, pasi edhe veti dyshim ti ka pranu që ka pas edhe ka prezentu. Më thonë zbashku me to jem stim armës. Kjo arma si shifet që ka pas personi me veti. Kim bërë dhe konfiskimin e armës, tash jem zbashku me dyshim të drejtim stacionit. Pra, lidhur me kanosjen, zbashku me dyshimtin, i cili është paraqit vetë stacion policor, me shku në shtëpinë e tina, kemi bërë konfiskimin e armës dhe me të zbashku jem drejtim me stacionit me kompletu rastin, lidhur me kanosjen që ka ndodhur. U takova me këtë personin.
Unë e kesh të do në Lugoj.
Po?
Prej shpjes të shkon Lugoj. Edhe kryu konë të hiqë asaj rrugës. Edhe ku gjojsh, me të kalju rrugës, më ka afru. Qa më këshyrë, thash kur të këshyrë më rrgu, jam të shkon Lugoj, lemra. Jo a din kur jam unë qka jam.
Më thonë të ka ka për mjeker?
Ka ka për mjeker, edhe a din kur jam unë. Jaj më rëdjarë se në gjatë, re. Thash si kam jetë e të jam u bo. Si sen. Edhe ju adin që atë bëju në ty që më këqyrë të më. Thash po të kush të këshyri, më rëdjallë, lemrat, jam të shkon të bëjë re, jo më nësi ju në trejt bëjë asë, aj. Edhe që atë ju konë.
Që ka ndodhë Masanina?
Masanina në qatë në zetë, në shkova në shpejt, më qëtësu, kështë e mi, relax. Edhe tani shkova, ti me ndu, të qelë qatë dollap, që e pa dhe atë aparatin aty, më ranë sy që kjo. Edhe veç me i tutë, për punat brosë, me i tutë, ku gjo tjetër ishë, punë e kërsnime. Se kjo është qësi problemi që nuk të janë rahat. Nëse i tutesh, adin që asi thot që po më tutet edhe Sa që në kishë pa, me siguri që ashtu të ma kishë pa.
Sot në ora 16:45 në stacionin policor ka ardhur një ankus i cili thotë se një person e ka kanuar me armë. Pas intervistimit të ankusit, në stacionin policor ka ardhur edhe i dyshimti ku e ka pranuar veprën dhe kemi shkuar në shtëpinë e tij, kemi bërë konfiskimin e armës. Dhe me urdhër të prokurorit, personi i dyshimt është liruar në procedurë të rregullt dhe rasti inicohet si posedimi i armës apo mjeti të rrezikshëm.